Hello all and welcome to the first of what will hopefully be 2 Christmas special winged reviews. And by Christmas specials, I mean videos I was planning on doing anyway, but as it's December, I'll be doing them wearing a silly hat. And what better way to celebrate Christmas than by looking at some horror books. Now you may remember a little while ago I did a video on some of the books by my favourite author James Herbert. I also did a review of the film Fluke, which is based on one of his books. Both of the videos end up doing a lot better than I expected them to do, and I had a lot of people telling me that I have to read The Rats, which is not only James Herbert's first book, but it's also largely considered to be the best one he's done. I was planning on reading the Rats trilogy anyway, but considering how many people told me I have to read it, I thought if I'm going to read it, I might as well do it now, and I might as well do the trilogy. So I got them. But before I get into those books, I want to briefly mention Sepulchre, which I read shortly before starting the Rats trilogy. It's alright, nothing special. So let's get on to the reason why you're here, the Rats trilogy, consisting of The Rats, Lair and Domain. But the easiest way to do this would just be to go through them one by one. Now the original plan was to read all these books and then go into the Haunted trilogy, Haunted, Ghost of Sleeth and his latest book, Ash, and then do a longer video with all of the books together, but considering how these books ended up being, I decided to do this video early. So let's start off with the one that everyone told me to look at, The Rats. Now, I looked at a few reviews before I actually went into these books, and on Amazon someone said that considering the book was written in 1974, it was probably good for its time, but horror's moved on since then, and this just doesn't keep up with it. Frankly, that is a complete load of crap. This was genius, and there's some really horrific stuff that happens in it. I mean, you can probably guess the plot. A group of mutant rats invade London, and people start to get mauled to death, and the government have to try and find a way to stop them. Thing is, it is really nasty with the rat attacks. I mean, they're the mutant strain, so they're sort of faster, stronger, more intelligent, and they also carry this disease which pretty much makes your skin shrink, rip apart, and you end up dying from it. Pretty much within 24 hours, I think it was. So, one bite and you are screwed. So, it was a really, really good book. I mean, some of the horrific stuff, one of them, it's not a spoiler or anything, it happens quite early on in the book, but there's a baby less than a year old, I think it was, playing with a puppy in a house. The mother goes off somewhere, and then a load of rats enter the house, and the baby and the dog both get mauled to death. That's horrific! I'm actually quite surprised they got away with it now, let alone back then. Apparently this was quite a controversial release when it was first done, seeing as it is so graphic and gory, which, saying this it doesn't keep up with today's standards is a load of crap. It is so good. And I do have a few minor gripes with it though, and if you're going to introduce a character just for them to die, that's absolutely fine, particularly if it ends up having something to do with the plot later on. No problem whatsoever. Only with this one, they introduce a woman, and you can tell within the first few pages of the chapter that she's just going to end up dying at the end of it. But it goes on for 15 pages, and it just got a little bit too much, and halfway through it you just start thinking, oh my god, just get on with it and kill her off already. But I mean, it goes into her background, her psychological problems, relationship with other people, and loads of stuff. It really builds her up to the point where I actually started to think that maybe she is going to become an actual character. But no, she did end up dying anyway, so it was just too long to build up a character and to go so far into them only to kill them off. Few pages, 5-6 pages, absolutely fine, no problem. 15, no. My only other gripe was that considering they are a sort of a mutant generation of rats, they're pretty much like the size of dogs and they're stronger, faster, blah blah blah, and they do try to investigate why these rats have come about and how come they are so strong and powerful. And although it does explain it, it's a bit of a cliche, and it's been done so many times before for different things, but considering it was written in 1974, you can kind of let it off. And it was probably good at the time, but that probably actually is one of those good for the time things, not the gore, the whole spoiler, which I won't spoil it, just read the book and find out for yourselves, because it's been done before, but it's as good a reason as any, it's just done before. So, but that's really it. Those are my pretty much only 2 gripes about this book. The rest of the book was absolute genius, nice and gory and some great stuff going on. Didn't really find it scary though, considering I don't mind rats too much. I used to know, well I do know some people who had pet rats, and they were great. I'm sure there is a difference between pet rats and these sorts of rats, but even wild rats don't really bother me too much. I wouldn't exactly go over and straight one of them, but I don't find them scary. If you do have a fear of rats, this book would probably shit you up completely, but I don't mind them, so I wasn't really that affected by it. But I still really enjoyed the book, and it was absolute brilliant. I probably still do prefer things like The Dark and The Secret of Crickley Hall, but even so, this is definitely one of James Herbert's better books, and was brilliant. When it finished, I couldn't start the sequel quick enough, really. That was Lair. I mean, slight spoiler here, but they do come up with a way to defeat the rats at the end of the first book, and the first book does end saying that some of the rats did survive, and that's where this book comes into it. It takes place a few years later, some rats survive, they've sort of grown in population again and are now attacking, so it's not really a sequel as so much it is just the rats again. But none of the characters from the first book actually make an appearance in this one. The person who actually came up with the plan of defeating the rats in the first book and then carried it out gets mentioned once. That's it. Otherwise, it's a completely new set of characters, which is fine. I just would have liked it if a couple of familiar people came back into it, particularly as how great they were in the first one and how useful they became. So, but it was still alright, and as sequels go, this wasn't too bad. It's a bit bigger than the first one, as you can see, it's probably about 2, maybe 3 times as long, but it was alright. It did seem to take far too long for things to actually properly get going. Though there are a few rat attacks and stuff throughout the book, it seems to go into more of an investigation type thing and trying to find out whether or not these are the same rats that were in the first book, or if they're just a normal type of rats that are causing problems. Of course, we know that they are the same type of rats, but it still takes us through the whole investigation, and it did draw out a little bit, but there were a few rat attacks and things like that in it to keep you going, and it was alright. Thing is, though in the first book they did have that disease, in this one they don't. I can't remember if they just actually lost it completely, but they've also got an antidote for the disease, so pretty much you're only going to get killed if you get mobbed by an entire swarm of them. Whereas in the first book, one bite and you are pretty much screwed, so it's kind of lowered their sort of the threat level of the rats in this one, but even still, with the numbers, they're still a big threat, and there were some really nasty scenes, yes, but certainly nothing as bad as what was in the first one, so it was alright, it did the job, it was alright for a sequel, so yeah, nothing special, did enjoy it, yeah. But then we came on to the third one, Domain. Oh dear God. As you can see, it's, yeah, we go size-wise, first one, second one, Domain. It's huge, and it did take me a while to get through it, but it could have been so awesome, but it kind of crapped all over itself. It does, again, the second one does end with a big finale, and they think, oh yeah, we've killed all the rats. Oh no, you haven't. But it tells you at the end, and then this one comes into it. But because it takes a few years later, the rats have pretty much decided that they've been defeated by humans twice, so they're just going to stay underground and live under there, come up to the surface every now and again, particularly at night, just to scavenge for food, but that is about it. Then there's a nuclear attack on London and 5 bombs are dropped, and when it said that rats have a higher resistance to sort of nuclear fallout and radiation, that sort of thing, than we do, so I thought, well, considering there's been a nuclear attack on London, 5 bombs have been dropped, the place is going to be a wasteland. Anybody that has survived is going to be hiding underground. Those who survived and are above ground are pretty much going to be affected by the fallout and are going to die soon anyway, and everybody else will be dead. So what's to stop the rats from coming up onto London, taking over the place, making it their domain, and then what's to stop them from gradually spreading out across the rest of the country? It could have been so awesome, but no. It decided to focus more on the people rather than the rats. And again, an entirely new set of characters. So again, none of the people from this one or the first one got mentioned at all, I don't think, anyway. So you get used to them though, it's perfectly fine. Again, just would have liked a few people to come up. But it focuses far too much on the people trying to survive the nuclear fallout and all that than it does the rats. Yes, there are a few scenes where people get attacked by rats and all that sort of thing, but there are far too few and far between. Considering how thick the book is, there's not enough of it. I mean, it's fair enough reading how people are surviving the nuclear attack and everything, but I didn't want to be reading about that. I wanted to read about people getting attacked and mauled to death and ripped apart by a group of rats, and I should probably see a psychiatrist about that, but what the hell. It just went off in completely the wrong direction. Yes, the finale is pretty good, and it does have a decent rat attack, but it was far too little, far too late. It needed more rats throughout the rest of the book, and so I actually did consider giving up with this one a couple of times, really, because it was alright and it was intriguing to find out how people would survive, but it just wasn't what I wanted to be reading about. But the other weird thing is that, considering London gets bombed, what about the rest of the country? I mean, after I think about 4 weeks, people do start coming up to the surface to see what's going on, and there's just nothing. I mean, it's just like the rest of the country doesn't exist. I mean, so that was just really, really weird. And you'd have thought that some people from other parts of the country would have been coming in, trying to find out, get rid of the fallout and all that sort of thing, just to try and help them, really. But there's nothing whatsoever. I don't even think that the rest of the country gets mentioned or anything like that. So it's pretty much just a case of they're on their own, which I suppose you could say made things a little bit more intense, but for me it raised a question that just bugged me, really. So yeah, I got through it just about. It was alright. It's certainly not as good as the first one, or the second one actually. So the first one is definitely the best of the trilogy though. Absolute genius. Second one, pretty good for a sequel. The third one, don't bother with really unless you are really keen on it. It goes off in completely the wrong direction, and it could have been so awesome though. Had it just focused more on the rats, it could have easily been the best of the lot, but it just didn't do it. So unfortunately, big disappointment with that one. So that's the Rats trilogy. First one, very, very good, great stuff. Second one, yeah, not too bad. Third one, no. So see you next time.